There we go. Little lag. Shouldn't be no lag, but that's how it goes. All right, well, we're going to be in chapter 5 tonight of Esther. A lot of people do chapter 5, 6, and 7 together because they kind of share a theme as the plot moves on in Esther. We left it last time that everybody was afraid in Susa. All the Jews were scared because the news that they had received that all the Jews were going to be killed. That created quite an uproar in Susa. And so Mordecai comes to Esther and he says, you're going to have to do something. And we left it, that's where it was last week. He was going back and forth with her maidens. And he said, you're going to have to do something. Maybe this is the very purpose why you have gotten into royalties, because God's got a plan for you. So she said, okay, here's what I'll do. I'm going to go fast for 3 days. You fast for 3 days. You have the other Jews in Susa fast for 3 days. And then I'll do what you've asked me to do. And that's where we kind of pick it up. Then it says in verse 17 of chapter 4, Mordecai then went away and did everything that Esther ordered him as queen, right? That's what she was asking of him. Let me check something, make sure I have the right. Yep, it's looking good. Chapter 5. On the third day, Esther put her royal robes on and stood in the inner court of the king's palace in front of the king's quarters, while the king was sitting on his royal throne inside the throne room opposite the entrance to the palace. That's pretty detailed, isn't it? That's one of the main things that lets people know that this book was actually written by somebody who had experienced Xerxes' throne room and the way it was laid out. The things that they describe in this book are absolutely accurate, and they know this now because of archaeology later. I wouldn't have had a doubt anyway, but it's kind of one of those things. Archaeology has come along and resolved a lot of things for us, and we can see a lot of these things. And so whoever wrote this book, and a lot of people argue who did and who didn't. Some people don't believe it's actually an inspired story or that it actually even happened. It was just something somebody wrote down, kind of like Aesop's Fables or something to teach a lesson. But I believe it to be inspired scripture, and I think that what it says we can bank on. That's my approach to it.
She's just hanging out there because she can't just go up to him.
She can't just go up to him. Nope. And that was Persian rule, Persian law, that it was under threat of death if you walked up to the king, even if you're the wife. Well, if you go back and study history, you'll see there's been a lot of wives kill kings to get their sons on the throne. There's been a lot of kings kill their wives and kill the sons so that they wouldn't take the throne. Even Nero was known to kill his own. He was Caesar, but he was known to kill his own kids because he didn't want nobody coming to take the throne. And there was always, how do we put this? There was always children of questionable fatherhood.
Sure.
And they didn't have 23andMe then, and so there was always a question of whose kid, whose child, is this something else? And then, of course, later on, you got Zeus running around, and he was having children everywhere, and they were, demigods, and so people just didn't trust one another. So, yeah, it was kind of a iffy situation.
Well, no wonder Joey's so laid back. We have no kingdom to fight over.
No kingdom to fight over. That's exactly right. But you can find out later on in life if there is a kingdom to fight over by what happens at a graveside. It's funny what people will fight over at a graveside.
I know. Dad had that experience this weekend.
Yeah. It's terrible, isn't it? Absolutely terrible.
People are like wanting to know what he's doing with her clothes.
Yeah. Yeah.
She's been gone 2 years.
Yeah.
Like she's not in her.
Yeah. And they're his to do with.
All of them. It was all Jill's to them.
Yeah.
This whole weekend.
That's how they think. Yeah.
It's like I never existed.
Yeah. And that happens so often. It really does. You want to find out how people can be. They can get really weird really quick when it comes to things left over at a graveside. Okay, so on the third day, Esther does this. She puts on her royal robes. Now, she's been fasting for 3 days. Now, what's interesting is there's no rules, there's no laws written down. We don't know why 3 days. I tried my best to research it today. Why 3? Now, I'd love to be a good New Testament preacher and tell you the reason why they did it 3 days was to represent the Trinity. Nobody in the Old Testament believed in the Trinity, so that didn't happen. They didn't believe in the Trinity in the Old Testament. We don't have any record of that whatsoever, of Trinitarian thought. But it is good preaching to say it's because of the Trinity. But we do know that it is a sign of perfection. It's a sign of completion. in biblical numerology, which I don't get a lot into, but a little bit. So 3 days they fasted. Now I'm going to tell you, I believe they also prayed. That was part of what they did, even though it doesn't say. That's kind of, it goes along with the fasting. So this would be, and they still do an Esther's fast before Purim, and it's 3 days, no food, no drink. It's pretty intense fast. A lot of people do it, but it's what a fast does. What my experience with fasting in my own life is, it gets your focus. It absolutely locks you in. Instead of preparing food, instead of eating food, you're spending time meditating, praying, talking to God, seeking His guidance and direction. And if you think about it, before you'll go 3 days without food, you're going to want to know something or have guidance pretty bad. And as soon as you get your answer, you go eat, right? It's kind of, fasting 3 days without food or drink is extremely difficult. Sometimes no. When Jesus fasted for 40 days, it was no food, no drink, no water, which is a supernatural phenomenon because 40 days without fluids, hard to live through. So it's a thing of God. Yeah, it's a thing of God at that point.
Body's not built to withstand that.
It is not, especially in an arid region, right? Yeah. Right? Yeah. I think about all the food that I got. Well, maybe I'll just eat that off and start my fast tomorrow. I do that a lot. So, yeah. It's hard to do a fast, but when you feel like your back's against the wall, which they do feel like their back's against the wall, it's life or death, and they need God to move on their behalf, and so they're fasting and they're seeking guidance and wisdom. And I think that we see a lot of wisdom that comes out of this on Esther's part, because at this point, Mordecai kind of drops off the scene. She goes in there in verse 2. And when the king saw Queen Esther standing in the court, she won favor in his sight. He looked over and saw her, and he began to smile. There's my sweetheart. I can just hear him now, right? She won favor in his sight, and he held out to Esther the golden scepter that was in his hand. Then Esther approached and touched the tip of the scepter. And that was the scepter. A lot of kings for a lot of years, rulers have used scepters, rods, something along that line, and it's just a picture of their authority over things. And so when he looked over and saw her, as was the custom, he stuck out the scepter, which is like saying, hey, you come here. And she walked over and touched the tip of the scepter, which would be like, I guess, kissing the ring of somebody in high authority. It's just, something that was kind of part of their day, and she was obviously well educated on that. So she walked over and touched the end of the scepter. And the king said to her, what is it, Queen Esther? You reckon he said it just like that? What is it, Queen Esther? Or did he say, hey, honey, right? He says, what is your request? So he knew that she's coming in with a request because it was absolutely a risk for her to walk up and walk in. And so he knew there was something up. He said, what is it? What is your request? It shall be given you even to half of my kingdom. Now that seems like something that a lot of kings and rulers say throughout history. I'll give you up to half of my kingdom until you try to get half the kingdom, right? And now, in divorce court, you end up with half or split or, there's still, kind of one of those things. But he walked up, he said, anything you want. So you get the picture here. He kind of dotes on her. I think he thinks a lot of Queen Esther. And I think Mordecai's right, looking at the story, because he said, maybe this is the reason why you have come to the position you've come to. Remember, you're the little orphan girl from the streets, and now you're queen of the highest king in the land at that time. And he dotes on her. I think God did something in his heart, and he was softened towards Esther. He loved her, and I'm sure she was also probably beautiful, an eye-catching kind of person, and she was his queen, but he thought a lot of her. He says, what you request, it shall be given you, even up to half the kingdom. And Esther said, if it please the king, right? Or if you think this is okay, you and Haman come today to a feast that I have prepared for the king, right? So she prepared a feast. Do you think the way to a man's heart is through his stomach? Yeah. Well, we know that about Ahasuerus, don't we? We understand that about Xerxes. He loved to party. He loved to have a banquet. He loved to have a feast. He loves that kind of opulence. And so what does she do in her wisdom? Let's think about it for a minute. What's going on in her mind? her people are going to be killed in less than a year. All Jews everywhere. Mordecai says, you're not going to be protected by being the queen. If they're going after all the Jews, they're going to go after you as well. You have to do something. And she said, I'll do this, but if I die, I die. It just is what it is. So that's going on in her mind. But her presentation was Persian. She comes in her royal robes, right? And she's beautiful. He dotes on her. She's, I don't want to say use the word working the situation, but she's working the situation. She's using everything to her advantage to save her people. And so she comes in and he's like, I'll give you anything, half my kingdom. What's she look like? I mean, he looked over and saw her and said, you can have it all, baby. You can have it all. And so I just think that, everything was sitting perfectly. And I think she had gained wisdom in her fast. And I don't want to disregard the fast in any way. I think that time of fasting, I think the wisdom of God that he had given her, Mordecai and the other people were praying, they were fasting, and I think God had led her into this. And so she knows how King Xerxes is. She knows he likes a banquet. She knows Haman is stuck on himself. He is extremely stuck on himself. Now, she says, I want you and Haman to come to the feast. Well, what's that going to do for Haman? As a matter of fact, later on, he says, just me and the king. It's just me and the king. She thinks the world of me. And so if he's in with the queen, he's in with the king. He's already in with the king. He's already been promoted to a position that doesn't make any sense. But here's one of the things I've been trying to read the history around this, and it's really obscure. But in the Jewish commentaries called the Midrash, there are several Midrash that they read. In some of the commentaries, they have another explanation for Haman. Now, what they do teach that he was a Amalekite, king of King Agag. He was part of that line. But his hatred is not necessarily for just the Jews, but for her uncle primarily. The Midrash teaches that they were actually both generals. Mordecai and Haman were generals in the army. They were given an allotment of money to take care of their men, to get their food, to do all the things they're supposed to do. Haman went through his money. And he got destitute. He needed to get rations for his men. He needed to take care of them. He had already blown the money. And Mordecai had taken care of his money. And so he came to Mordecai and said, loan me some money so I can take care of my men. Otherwise, we're not going to fare well in battle. And so Mordecai then says, I will. I'll give you money. Swear your allegiance to me. Be my bondservant. So there is a Jewish tradition out there that Haman was a slave to Mordecai. Now, take that and a pinch of salt, you don't have anything. I mean, you can't bank anything on that. But it's been a long historical teaching. And when I say long, it goes back to about 250, 300 AD. It's not that old. It's not as old as this. It's not 350 years before Christ. It's 600 or 700 years after this. Yes, sir?
It makes sense.
Well, right, you can make a logic out of that.
Yeah, I mean, the way this plays out.
Yeah, yeah. Now let's go back to Haman in the gates, and he's in the gate, and here his servant comes in, and everybody's supposed to bow, and Mordecai's not going to bow to his servant. So you got that picture, okay? There's also another Midrash teaching that one of the reasons why he wouldn't bow to Haman, not only was he his servant, he had been bought. Now Haman had probably purchased his own freedom, but evidently Mordecai wasn't going to bow to him. But also he was known to wear, the people were known to wear the image of their god. Now, they were Zoroastrian. Let's see if I can pull that up and you see. Can you see that? You ever seen that picture? That is Ahura Mazda. Ahura Mazda is the creator of the cosmos. He, in their religion, this is a part of the Zoroastrian belief set. He's the creator god. And he created a couple other gods. One of them is evil, one of them is good, and they fight and battle all the time. Well, this would have been maybe the symbol on his chest, on his regalia. It might have been part of, and no Jew is going to bow to a graven image. This is a graven image. No Jew is going to bow to a graven image. So that's also another possibility that as a Jew, he wasn't going to bow because he had a graven image on his chest of this their God, which y'all seen that before, right? Yeah. He rides around on those wings. Pretty amazing thing. Part of that religion, Zoroastrianism, you have King of Kings and Lord of Lords is used a lot. He is the Lord of Light. And it's a good chance that the Magi that visited Jesus were Zoroastrian. It is a monotheistic style religions, and a lot of people that try to support that Christianity got their God from ancient gods, and we get Christmas from ancient pagan holidays, and all that other malarkey they try to sell. They'll try to say this is one of the earlier monotheistic religions, and therefore the forerunner of all monotheistic religions, which is not the case. It doesn't run that way. But so that's some of the argument about who Naaman was and why he and Mordecai had all of this fallout. I've read both of those in the last few days. Some of these papers are hard to read because they're really, really old, and their syntax is not like, so it's really kind of hard to follow along. But one of the things that's been taught in Jewish circles for a long time is that he was Mordecai's servant. And so Mordecai wouldn't bow to a servant. And he was mad because, he needed money. Mordecai tricked him. That story goes almost back to Jacob and Esau. Yes, ma'am.
I don't know the name of the king or whatever, but Haman was supposed to he was one of the group that was supposed to wipe them out, and they kept their sheep
Yes.
and gold. And if he'd have been, if they'd have done what God said, he wouldn't have been alive.
That's exactly right. Haman wouldn't even be a player if they'd have done what God asked him to do. And that's kind of my gut. That's what I go to. And a lot of Christian scholars, they attribute it to that. They stay away from the midrash and all those, because midrash are just commentaries and thoughts and ideas that have been accumulated. And well, it's okay. How do we explain this? And so they've come up with all these different ways to explain why Haman hated the Jews so bad and things like that. But I think it goes all the way back, because it goes out of its way in Esther to say he's in that line. That he was part of that family. Very wealthy family. Haman had a lot of money. Remember, he offered 10,000 talents of silver to let him go kill all the Jews. He had money. And it may be the reason why he got promoted like he did. You ever notice that people with money can get promoted quicker than people, if you're from the right family or you got the right lineage or the right bank account, you can get all kind of promotions. I had an uncle that donated a lot of money to a Baptist institution, and they gave him an honorary doctorate. He never finished 6th grade. Now, he was extremely wealthy, and he was extremely smart because he could make a business. He knew how to make a dollar. But because he donated so much money, he got an honorary doctorate from this school. Well, that piece of paper that doctorate's on is not any more valuable than this Kleenex that I'm wallowing around up here in front of y'all. Because he didn't earn it. He paid for it. Well, we see those kind of things. And so it may be the case when we go back, Haman may have come from a family that had money and had prestige, going all the way back to the Amalekites a long time ago. And then ancient enemies of Israel. Does that make sense? That's kind of how I fall down on it. So the king and Haman went to the feast that Esther had prepared. And as they were drinking wine, after the feast, the king said to Esther, what is your wish? There's something going on here. You're after something. What is it you would like to have? And that word for wish there is like, according to the law, what kind of gifts can you give? What kind of gifts can you receive? That's what that word wish means. And he goes on and says, what is your request? Which is, what's your supplication? What is it you're asking me for? He's already said, I'll give you anything. Up to half the kingdom. Now, that may have just been words. It may have been something that they said all the time. You ever gone outside and says raining cats and dogs? And a literal mind will go, I don't see either. But, we use, those kind of allegorical speaking sometimes. So he says, what is your request? Even to half my kingdom, it shall be fulfilled. Then Esther answered, my wish and my request is, if I have found favor in the sight of the king, and if it pleases the king, to grant my wish and fulfill my request, let the king and Haman come to the feast that I'll prepare for them tomorrow and I will do as the king asks. So she is really
Laying it on thick.
very dramatic. You know, it's you know, you almost see the pomp and circumstance in it all, and you know, just Haman and the king. I mean, the two top dudes of all 127 provinces, and she throws a banquet just for them. And I mean,
He knows.
yeah,
He's like, all right,
yeah,
give it up.
something's going on. Something going on. It's like if you go in, and you say, Joey, you're so cute, and start. You can't curl his hair, can you? But anyway,
Usually I would call my dad,
okay,
and I'll be like, hey, Daddy.
yeah.
He's like, what?
What do you want? Right. How much? How much will it take, right? So Haman goes out joyful and glad of heart. He's feeling like he is something, isn't he? He goes out joyful and glad of heart. But when Haman saw Mordecai in the king's gate, that he neither rose nor trembled before him, he was filled with wrath against Mordecai. Now, Mordecai knows the source of everything that's going on with the death of the Jews. He knows where this is coming from. So he's even madder now. And let me ask you a question. And I thought of this today. What will you all do if you were Mordecai and Haman got within arm's reach and Haman swore to kill you and your entire family, all of your kindred, and he walked by in front of you? Would you maybe take matters in your own hands? Would it be hard to be restrained in Haman's presence? Do what? Smite thee with my sword, yes. So Haman comes out. Mordecai's glaring at him. He doesn't get up. He doesn't tremble. He's not quaking. He doesn't care anything about Haman. Matter of fact, he probably has a lot of animosity towards Haman now. Haman comes out, and he's on cloud nine. He looks over, and who's there? Mordecai, sitting in the gates, and he still won't pay him homage. Now, have you ever had anybody live in your brain rent-free? Mordecai is living in Haman's mind rent-free. When he sees him, he's just wroth. He's just overtaken with anger. And I think there's some principles we can draw from this. Nobody should anger you to that degree. Nobody. But we see that this is a normal human reaction, and he's mad, and he's filled with wrath, and he's just boiling. And listen with this. Verse 10, nevertheless, Haman restrained himself and went home and sent and brought his friends and his wife Zeresh. Now, Jewish Midrash says that Zeresh was twice as evil as Haman. Twice as evil. That's what the Midrash says about her. So when they do the plays and everything, she's also one they bring up and they boo, Zeresh. Because she's the one that fills him with bad ideas. So he restrained himself. He went home, and what did he do? He called his honey. He called his wife. He calls his best friends. And he's like, pity party time, right? Haman recounted to them the splendor of the riches, the number of his sons, and all the promotions which the king had honored him, and how he advanced him above all the officials, servants of the king. Then Haman said, even Queen Esther, let no one but me come with the king to the feast she prepared. And tomorrow I'm invited by her together with the king. All of this is worth nothing to me. You think that's an overreaching statement? He just recounted all the splendor of his life and all the blessings, if you will, that had been thrust upon him, but none of that mattered. He couldn't see any of the good because you got this one Jewish guy in the gate who won't honor me. One person. One person. And he says everything else is nothing. That sounds like a man, though, doesn't it? All this is worth nothing to me. So as long as I see Mordecai the Jew sitting in the king's gate, then his wife Zeresh and all of his friends said to him, let a gallows 50 cubits high be made, and in the morning tell the king to have Mordecai hanged upon it. Then go joyfully with the king to the feast. And the idea pleased Haman, and he had the gallows made. 50 cubits, about 75 feet. Now, again, this wouldn't be a gallows like we think about, by hanging by the rope. Could be, yes. Probably not. It was more of an impalement, and I did some researching on impalement. Don't do that research, y'all. People, woo. I mean, they'll take a sharpened post, shove it all the way through your body from bottom to top, and the ones that had real skill wouldn't kill you. And depending on the height of the pole, the longer it took for you to slide down, the more torture that was involved. So this is Zeresh. This is his loving wife. She says, well, I'll tell you what to do, Haman. Build you a huge gibbet, big post. The word for gallows is the word for post or tree or lumber.
What was her motivation?
See, you got to kind of wonder what she just wants her man to get further in life, right? Because it's blessing her. I don't know, but
But
yeah.
how did the king find out about all this?
Yeah, see?
Esther find out.
Yeah. Yeah, see,
See,
there's a whole lot of something going on behind the scenes. 75 foot tall. Now, that doesn't mean that he went out and he got a 75-foot tree and mounted it in the courtyard. The chances are really good they did this on a regular basis, and it was to let people know, don't break the law. So they probably had structure set up, but they probably went to one of the taller ones, and so it would reach higher than everything else so that you could make an example of this one person. They would be above and beyond. They probably impaled them and then pivoted the pole up. And I mean, you can just think of the brutality and the gruesomeness of this. And it was in the city square. It was for all to see because they wanted you to walk the line. They didn't want you to step out of line at all. Now, even if it was a gallows with a rope and hanging by the neck, that's still saying a lot. You know, you take somebody up on a 75-foot gallows and you give them a 65-foot rope and then drop them, you're going to snap them in two. So, I mean, it's whichever way it works out, it's a gruesome way to die. It's also making a point to everybody else that may be thinking about breaking the law or going against you. Haman thinks he's got this kind of power and authority. Zeresh says, go talk to the king about it. He'll gladly do what you want him to do. Now, there's going to be a plot twist. There's going to be a plot twist. I won't go any further with this tonight. I just want y'all to know. Because the worst thing that could ever happen in Naaman's life happens in chapter 6. I love how God works things out. I love it. So y'all study up. If you want to, then we'll get back together next week. Any thoughts or questions? Comments? Everybody good?
keep your friends close, keep the enemies close.
Even closer. That's exactly right. Let me stop recording.